So Trump is doing everything he can after the court decision declaring his tariffs illegal. It has a temporary hold before they'll get removed. But at the moment, Trump's tariffs that he issued unilaterally as chief executive using emergency powers on everything from Penguin Island to France to Germany to all these different countries, all of them have been declared illegal because he did it unilaterally without the courts, and that it could not be declared that in all of these instances it was a national security crisis that created the impetus for the placement of these sanctions, especially since many of them were being placed purely because of the existence of a trade deficit. And with countries like Vietnam, you're gonna get a trade deficit. So it's been declared illegal, but there's a stay on it as the Trump administration has appealed the decision. And of course, it is going to be further reviewed. But in the meantime, as it's been declared illegal, but is still in place, and the Trump administration is posting on Twitter, bragging about the revenue. I saw they posted today, we've collected over $200 billion from tariffs, woo. And when you go into the replies, it's just a bunch of people saying, why are you bragging so much about taxing us? Because it's Americans who buy these products who end up paying the taxes, who have them paying for these products. It is the companies who import them who end up having to pay these fees and then pass them down to the consumer or pass them down to the business. The business has to absorb it otherwise. Usually some combination of the two. But either way, even though the majority of the public, with a 40% holding out compared to the majority of Americans who think that tariffs are hurting the United States, which is a big switch from when he entered the White House, he is continuing to burrow along with it. It is still fundamental to his economic philosophy, and so he is still fighting the courts. And verbally, he is asserting that if he loses this court decision, that if he loses this appeal, he'll have to pay back all the revenue, and America will enter a catastrophe. It will suffer so greatly, and I quote, listen to this.
If, as a federal appeals court recently ruled, what if most of President Trump's tariffs are based on a misreading of the law and are unconstitutional? What if the U.S. Supreme Court upholds that ruling? What if the U.S. Treasury then has to refund more than $200 billion to businesses that paid those tariffs? Here are President Trump's rather dire answers both yesterday and today.
If you took away tariffs, we could end up being a third world country. If we don't win that case, our country is going to suffer so greatly.
Sounds bad. CNN's Vanessa Yurkevich is at the Magic Wall. Vanessa, what kind of a potential mess might we be looking at here?
Yeah, Jake, it's very messy because we've never had tariffs at this scale, and we've never talked about a refund check totaling more than $210 billion. This is the amount that the U.S. government has collected through August 24th from tariffs. And reminder to folks out there, who's paying this? This is U.S. businesses that have paid this much money because of the Trump administration's tariffs. Now, where do we stand exactly? So on Friday, there was an appeals court that ruled that Trump's tariffs were unlawful because he was using the Powers Act, an Emergency Powers Act, also known as IEPA, and the judge essentially said that's unlawful. So the Trump administration now is planning to appeal that with the Supreme Court. However, if they're not...
Wait, what's this that somebody just posted? This is why Joe Rogan simps for Trump. Digital content creators are among the dozens of occupations that the Treasury Department has deemed eligible for the no tax on tips deduction. They explicitly name streamers, influencers, podcasters as illustrative examples. Huh. You don't say. Well, there's never been a greater time to donate to DylanBurns.tv. Did you know every single dime goes straight into funding on-the-ground war documentaries? Every dime. Tax-free, I hear, in fact. Tax-free, I hear. My goodness. Isn't it just so sad Trump can't run a third time? I will tell you, no tax on tips is 100% unfair. It is 100%. I don't care how much I benefit from it. It is 100% unfair. Because you think about it, if you're like a paid job, if you go and you take a salary, you're not being tipped you're working in a job that has nothing to do with tips. Why is it that your salary does get taxed more than my salary? Totally not fair. And you can say I'm very upset about it. Oh, I'm devastated actually about the unfairness of more tax deductions. Oh, ooh, God, it's so bad. Anyway, go to DylanBurns.tv to donate. DylanBurns.tv to donate. DylanBurns.tv/donate.
A curd is a curd.
Here's my $2 tax-free, I hear, tip. Tax-free, they say. Is that in the final bill? Can somebody tell me if that was in the final bill? What about DoorDash tips? I think DoorDash tips also aren't taxable. Or I don't really, honestly, I don't know for sure. Either way, where were we?
Successful, Jake. The ruling goes into effect on October 14th, which means that the U.S. government is going to have to stop collecting tariffs.
I mean, I understand the argument of how much of a mess will this make to return all that money. But what the president did was unilaterally declare he's going to put in all these tariffs without asking Congress. And he just declared every single tariff emergency. Every single one. Even if it was just because an argument he had with a foreign leader and didn't like how it went. And so he increases the tariff by 10 to 20%. Emergency. Every single one's an emergency. Every single one is a life or death struggle for the United States. Of course, that's not going to uphold in court. And so now, 8 months into the office, going on 9, you're facing this money being returned, which is only going to further increase the deficit that the president has set us in, as 25% of our national debt is already Trumpian. And that number's only going to increase. And what does that mean for like the future of tariff policy? Again, if you had gone through Congress, maybe you could have gotten some limited tariff powers. That's not what you did. You just declared everything an emergency when it wasn't an emergency, build a house of cards, and then it tumbled down. It's no fault but his own. Now he's got to clean up the mess. Well, our mess.
And pay back all of that money to U.S. businesses. How does that happen? Well, no one really knows, but here are some guesses from experts. The government could either just refund all the tariffs to those U.S. businesses and importers who have paid them. They could argue that they're only going to refund the tariffs to the plaintiffs that were on that ruling on Friday. And that's just a few. That's not a lot.
Wanted to donate for tax purposes. Just wanted to say, does Marjorie Taylor Greene look like Mickey Rourke to anyone else, or am I just crazy?
You know, you're not the first person to make that comparison. I've heard that comparison on a few occasions. So there might be something to that. I didn't spend a lot of time growing up looking at Mickey Rourke, but from the few times that I Googled it, I remember coming away going like, oh, I understand that. So, yeah, you're not the first person to say that. And thank you for the $20 tax purpose donation. Don't we all just feel so responsible being selective with our donations for tax purposes? My gosh. Don't you feel like America is truly being made great again? Anyway, back to the biggest tariff refund scandal in American history.
Lot of businesses, or they could require, the federal government could require individual importers or individual businesses to request refunds. Jake, we're talking about thousands of businesses that would have to make those requests. That would surely take a lot of time and could be quite confusing for businesses who are just trying to do the math on how much they have paid so far.
And Vanessa, while this is all going on, we're going to get a lot of information about the job market this week. Today we got the first part of this data. What does it say?
Imagine how shit it must feel, how absolutely garbage it must feel if you shuttered the doors of your business because of these tariffs because you couldn't pay them. And then at the end of it, they just say, oh, illegal. And then everybody else gets a refund, but you never had the money to give them in the first place. So you went out of business because of totally illegal actions taken by the U.S. president. Just tough. Tough.
We got the JOLTS report earlier today, and that talks about openings, hirings, and separations, layoffs, or firings. What we saw in this new report this morning was a little bit different than what we've been seeing. We saw now that there are fewer jobs available, so about less than one job per job seeker. You see the numbers right there. Jobs open, 7.18 million. Those looking for a job, those unemployed, 7.2 million. So now the job seeker no longer has the upper hand as they had in the pandemic. And that is really a softening of the labor market, which really supports what we saw in the July jobs report, when we saw a really, really meager 73,000 jobs added in the month of July. President Trump was really upset by that, and he fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because of that.
So, you know what this seems to indicate? She wasn't wrong. Her statistics were right. And now the data has continued to go down the same path that she suggested. And now there are more unemployed people than there are jobs open, which would be the trend, which would be the outcome of the trend that she was pointing towards. And by the way, this is the first time that we've hit this in over 4 years. The last time we've had more unemployed people than jobs was during the end of the pandemic.
Where are the jobs openings increasing? Where are they decreasing, Jake? Well, healthcare and social assistance. This is a category that has seen a lot of robust hiring. A reversal here, fewer jobs opening in that category. Fewer jobs down by more than 100,000 in retail and trade, mining and lodging, also fewer openings.
Retail and trade. Retail, of course, people selling stuff off the shelves. If people are not coming to buy things because they don't got the money to, or because the prices have gone up significantly, or because these businesses have had to make cuts because of the new tax costs, that could make some sense. For trade, I mean, that's pretty self-explanatory. If you're somebody who works at a dock and less stuff is being shipped in, well, that means maybe even if you don't get laid off, that might mean you get less overtime hours.
Some increases that we've seen.
Manufacturing makes sense, that there was some increase in manufacturing as Trump has been trying to make this big push for bringing manufacturing jobs back. But I imagine that that is somewhat going to be hobbled by the fact that if you're trying to import certain manufacturing parts, i.e. you want to manufacture 80% of the thing here and import 20% of it from France because this one French plant has a specialized part, which is the only thing that can make that for the device that you're creating. And that exists in a lot of different industries around the world where there's only a few plants or a few factories or a few countries that can produce that part. Instead of having to do the entire operation, put in all this cost, which might be unnecessary for your business or not a cost you can bear, you can instead import that part. And not only does that make it more cost effective for the business, it also makes it more cost effective for the consumer because the product is going to cost a lot less. And so in some instances, there's going to be manufacturers who might be interested in bringing manufacturing to the United States, but is not willing to have to import every single part and have to pay exorbitant costs or make it all domestically.
Increases in positions, construction, we know the president's going to like that, manufacturing as well, and wholesale trade. Jake, I will just say that this is a snapshot of the labor market. A lot of folks are looking to that major U.S. government jobs report later this week on Friday. That is what the president is also going to be looking at to see if those numbers are to his liking, Jake.
Yeah, interesting. Vanessa,
now, I want to keep talking about this for one more moment. And the reason why is that the countenance to these unemployment job numbers and the countenance to a lot of the complaints I'm making.
5 tier 1 subscriptions.
I feel like manufacturing isn't that hard. America doing it in a modern way, though, wouldn't create as many jobs because of automation. Well, let me give you an example. TMSC, the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. This is a very, very, very top of the field organization when it comes to manufacturing microchips. In fact, it is the top of the very, very pyramid. Very, very top. When they wanted to bring that manufacturing to the United States during the Biden administration, as the Biden administration was putting grants on the table in order to incentivize it, as Biden both wanted to bring manufacturing jobs to the United States, give it an economic boost, as well as bring home microchip manufacturing because of its defense sector needs. They put the money on the table. They start bringing the factories over. At first, they have a certain percentage of the workforce that's American and a certain percentage of the workforce that's Taiwanese. Why? Because it takes time for these American workers to learn how to make these microchips. And even as they start to phase out the Taiwanese workers and more American workers come in, then you got to think about, okay, what microchips are they making? They're not actually making the top microchips of the field. They're making some stuff that's pretty standard. And so if you wanted to get the best microchips in the field, you're going to have to trade up those workers a lot more. And you're going to have to get different pieces of machinery and different pieces of technical equipment. And you're going to have to get certain pieces of knowledge that is not available. But the company could make available. They could make those investments, but it's going to take time. And it's going to take effort. A lot less effort to just roll off another microchip off the currently existing Taiwanese plant. Construction makes sense, but another downward pressure on construction that I know of is that the tariffs have affected things like including raw materials that are necessary for construction. And as we're looking at repairing and rebuilding our home that was burnt down, we're seeing that a lot of the materials for rebuilding the home have actually gotten more expensive due to the tariffs. And so, yes, construction has gone up. That's good. I wonder if that will be sustained. And I wonder if the tariff removed, if the tariffs are kept illegal and they're removed, if that construction boom will be even bigger.
Okay, Rich, thanks so much. Let's explore the possibilities with an expert, wealth and investment manager firm president Ross Gerber. Ross.
And I have no interest in that. But I do have interest in one more thing that I wanted to show you guys. So when talking about these numbers, these unemployment numbers, one thing that I've been responded to is, look, this is not a question about employment for everybody. This is a question about employment for American citizens. And American citizens, people born in the United States, those specifically, not even when you talk about immigrants, but people born in the United States, they're doing better because of the deportations and because of all of these Trump policies towards manufacturing. That these tariffs are bringing back manufacturing jobs. As you can see, some manufacturing job boost. Obviously, you can point to the drop in jobs in sales, the drop in jobs in other sectors like healthcare and otherwise, but there's a boost there. And the deportations are taking away construction jobs and taking away people who are working construction jobs, leaving them for native-born Americans. Now, I disagree with the economics of this. I think having these people consume goods at the store, you know, buy from local markets, go pay the barber to get a haircut, these types of things add to the local economy. They have to pay taxes in other ways, and they can contribute to your local economy in other ways. And just by deporting these people, it's not as simple as -1 immigrant plus 1 job. It's also, okay, well, now their income is lost. They're not spending here, here, and here, and here, and here. And so that can have downstream effects. And downstream effects are being had, not only on certain sectors that rely largely on migrant labor, for example, construction. I know the shrimping industry, for example, relies highly on migrant labor, but also for those businesses that serviced migrants in everyday life. So it's not as simple as just deporting these people. But if we look at the data, whether or not you believe me or not, or you agree with my philosophy, maybe I'm wrong, but the data seems to indicate that, number one, U.S.-born employment is not improving. In fact, U.S.-born employment for 2025, and I'm talking about people born in the United States, not people who are citizens who are working, that have, you know, worked in the United States after moving here, or we're talking about people who are working here on work visas, or we're talking people who are working here undocumented. We're talking about people between the ages of 25, 54, the prime working age adults. We have less of them working than in 2023 and 2024. And this is the year that we're ramping up these deportations and Trump's tariffs have gone into effect. And as you see here, the numbers are actually at their worst in the month of July, meaning as time has gone on, it has gotten worse. It has gotten worse in 2023 and it has gotten worse in 2024. So it might be one thing to talk about stagnation. It might be one thing to talk about any other economic issue that could be contributing to the slump. But to say that these deportations and to say that this tariff policy is increasing U.S.-born employment, even if you don't care about the employment of people who are citizens but moved here, even if you don't care about people who are non-citizens but are working on work visas or otherwise, we're talking about people born in the United States. This is supposed to be the group of people that Trump was servicing most directly. They are not doing better when it comes to employment. And when you look for people who are U.S.-born non-workers, these are people who are born in the United States and are non-workers, their count is higher in 2025. And not just by like, you know, 100,000 here or 100,000 there, by about like 2 million more. As you can see here. Now, this is age people plus 16, above the age of 16. and are unemployed or not in the labor force. And it's sitting at past 92 million people, and compared to 2024 and 2023. So you could say that we haven't exactly entered an employment crisis, but we have more unemployed people than there are jobs. We have more people unemployed between the ages of 25 and 55 compared to 2024 and 2023. And the amount of US born non-workers are higher than in previous years. So to say that these deportations are helping people who were born here, native born Americans, if you want to call them that, people who were born in the United States, people who, hell, even people who moved here and became citizens, the data does not seem to flesh out with some employment boom that's correlative with these deportations. In fact, as of this month, it is the worst for the entirety of the time Trump has been in office. So right now, the job numbers are not in crisis, but the job numbers are seemingly not improving based upon the deportations so far done. How it will continue to affect moving forward, how it will continue to change moving forward, we have yet to see.